Hey everybody, it's me Lone, back with another Fallout 76 video, and recently, as you know, we did a guide for legendary weapons in Fallout 76, updated for 2021, due to the changes that were made to legendary attributes in the Steel Rain update. Well, it's about time that we make the next video in this series, and do a guide on legendary armor pieces now in the game. So if this video does help you, if you enjoy it, please like it, I would really appreciate it. Subscribe if you're new, but with all that out of the way, let's get to the video. Okay, so we have some tables here with all the legendary effects for armor pieces in the game. As always, this information has been sourced from the Fallout Wiki, so check that link out in the description if you're interested. But as you can see, we have color coded these once again. So the ones in green are tier 1, effectively I believe these to be the best of the best legendary effects for armor. Tier 2, the ones in orange, the more middle of the road legendary armor pieces, and then tier 3, the ones in yellow, the kind of lower ranked legendary effects for armor, in my opinion. Please keep this in mind. This is in my opinion, and I'm trying to make these videos apply to as many different builds, playstyles, and also player experiences out there. And that can get hard, especially with armor, because you can have up to 5 different armor pieces equipped at any one time for various scenarios. And keep in mind too, finally, that within each tier, I've not ranked them in any particular order. For the most part, they are in alphabetical order, but sometimes I've grouped very similar effects together, just so we can talk about them in one go. So with all that out of the way, let's start off with the first star, and then we'll go on from there. So Chameleon Armor. Blend with the environment while sneaking and not moving. You get a plus 20 stealth field per piece, may exceed 100, and it may be used while jumping and jetpacking. So just with how popular and powerful sneak builds are in the game, Chameleon armor pieces really do have to be top tier, especially if you're a full health build and you don't have the benefits of unyielding as a low health build, boosting your agility and therefore boosting your ability to sneak. You kind of, for the most part, do need to have Chameleon armor to help you sneak as a full health build, and therefore get that increased damage. If you're a low health build and you're rocking full unyielding armor anyways, not so much. Like, you don't really need to have Chameleon. I use a full unyielding set in the game and I barely break sneak as it is. So maybe 1 piece, maybe 2 piece, but to be honest, not more than that. But yeah, full health builds, Chameleon armor, really nice for sneaking. So I do believe that they're top tier just for that reason. Then we have one of the new ones, Overeaters. So you increase damage reduction up to 6% as you fill your hunger and thirst meters. So when they're 81% to 100% full, you get 3% damage reduction for each meter. On paper, I'll get to the calculations in a second, it gets a bit confusing, but just know this is damage reduction, it is not energy reduction, it's not fire resistance, it's nothing like that, alright? It is just ballistic damage in the game. But to be honest, that's the kind of damage that you really want to be keeping an eye out for, because armor piercing rounds, Mr. Gutsies, the Decryption Daily Op where they have that mutation that bypass your armor, a lot of ballistic damage in the game can really wreck you very quickly. So this is why I believe Overeaters is top tier, just for that reason, if you want to become a super tank in the game. But of course, the downside is that it doesn't have any energy protection. You still have some sort of energy protection no matter what armor you have for the most part, but this legendary effect isn't helping you in that regard, but I still think it's top tier. Just keep in mind though how it all stacks together. So with multiple pieces, damage reduction from hunger and thirst are added together separately before the reduction is calculated. So 5 parts max gives you 15% reduction for fully fed and 15% reduction from fully hydrated, but then the total reductions from hunger and thirst are then multiplied separately. So if you have 1 part, it's technically 1 minus 0.97 by 0.97, so a 5.9% reduction in damage, and then if you have 5 parts, it turns out to be a 27.8% reduction in damage, instead of that full kind of 6 and 30% reduction. So not quite that full amount, but still very good. Again, against those armor piercing rounds, you're really going to find yourself protected with Overeaters armor. And then we have the king of armor in the game, Unyielding. It's still the best, I would say, in my opinion. So with Unyielding armor, you gain up to 3 to all stats except endurance when you're low health, and that is usually, again, when you're below 20% health. That's usually where lower health builds like to sit for the most part. And Unyielding armor is so good because it's boosting your special 3 across the board except for endurance. So when you're boosting your strength, you're getting more carry weight and more unarmed or melee damage. When you boost your perception, you're getting more accuracy and VATS. When you're boosting your charisma, you're getting better bartering. When you increase your intelligence, more XP and better yield from scrapping. When you increase your agility, it's more AP, so you can use VATS more dodgy, more sprinting. And then, of course, as I said before, you have better sneak when you have more agility. And then finally, with luck, you get a better or a faster refill when it comes to your crits in VATS. So many benefits when it comes to unyielding. It's really hard to pass up. That's why most, if not all, full health or low health builds, I should say, rock almost a full set, if not a full set of unyielding armor. So it's definitely still the king and definitely what you want to be aiming towards if you want to be doing a low health build in the game. So let's move on to the second tier now of the first star. I have bolstering and vanguards both here. So I believe in my previous video on this, these were top tier. I believe they're second tier now. Let me explain. So if you're a low health build, bolstering armor grants you up to 35 energy and damage resistance to lower your health. So when you're between 0 and 10% health, you get that full 35. But again, when you're just below 20, like we usually are as low health builds, you get plus 32, which is still nice. And then vanguards, it's the opposite. You get up to 35 energy and damage resistance the higher your health. So when you're between or above 90% health, you get that full plus 35. And when you combine that with a vampire's weapon, you're pretty much always staying above 90% anyways. So the reason why bolstering and vanguards, I put them into tier 2 is because I've always said this, and everyone's always said that resistance in the game, when you start to get to that kind of 350, 400-ish level, beyond that point, the returns start to diminish. You don't want to keep adding resistance for your energy and damage because at that stage, it's just not doing much more. And most of you probably, or a lot of you probably have Secret Service armor anyways, which is already giving you a crazy amount of energy resistance and damage resistance. So do you need much more with bolstering and vanguards? Probably not. I think there are better effects out there for you, though sometimes I like to have a piece of bolstering or 2 pieces of bolstering in addition to my unyielding armor, just to give me certain protections against energy resistance, especially because most armor in the game has lower energy resistance as opposed to damage resistance, and you don't have a perk card like Barbarian, aside from Ironclad, which takes up a lot of points to boost up your energy resistance. So I personally do notice a difference when it comes to energy damage when I'm wearing a bolstering piece of armor, or even 2. So for that reason, I still believe they're second tier, but because they're not reducing your damage and energy damage by 1%, it's not as good when it comes to the game and the meta, if you will. So bolstering vanguard, still nice if you want to be a little bit more of a tank, but I think there's better armor out there for you. Then we have life saving. So when you're incapacitated, you gain a 50% chance to revive yourself with a stim pack once every minute. This does not stack. So what does this mean? Effectively, no matter how many pieces of life saving armor you have on, they each in and of themselves give you a 50% chance to be revived when you die. And that's only if you're not taking crazy poison damage or whatever damage and you die instantly, because you know that happens a lot in the game. But when you do get incapacitated and you have the ability to be revived, that's when life-saving armor can be really nice. Again, especially if you're a low health build, because you die every now and again, to be revived mid-fight and not have to kind of come back to the fight is really nice, especially if you have the Revenant perk card to boost your damage for 2 minutes. Really nice armor. I would say don't have more than 2, because usually even with 2, most of the time you're getting revived. But because it's only giving you a benefit when you die, I find it hard to make it a higher tier armor. And of course, if you're full health, you don't really need life-saving armor. So I think it's solid, just 1 or 2 pieces in certain situations, not all the time, only when you know you're going to die, or it's likely that you're going to die, and then you'll be sweet. Then we got weightless armor. It weighs 90% less and does not count as armor for the Chameleon mutation. The Chameleon mutation is you're invisible in combat if you're unarmored or wearing weightless armor, and you're standing still. You must be stationary and not attacking for the effect to work. So a lot of people kind of compare the Chameleon mutation to the Chameleon legendary effect, and I find the Chameleon legendary effect to be more popular because when you're sneaking like that and you're crouched using Chameleon legendary armor, you can shoot at the same time, whereas using the Chameleon mutation, as soon as you shoot, you lose the effect. The idea is that you kind of stay still to become invisible, shoot when you need to, and then, go back into being invisible. So that's the idea. I think Chameleon armor is a bit more versatile, but also as well, weightless armor, just because it weighs 90% less, it's a really nice armor to keep you protected and also not, burden you so much with your carry capacity to allow you to go out and get some junk if you ever need to, or get a bunch of materials if you ever need to. So that's why I do think that weightless is second tier, probably not first tier, but I think it's a solid choice if you want to try and use the Chameleon mutation. and also, loot a lot and get a lot of junk in any particular circumstance. And now we have all the legendary effects that reduce your damage from certain enemies. So Mutant Slayers, Troubleshooters, Zealots, Assassins, Exterminators, Ghoul Slayers, and Hunters reduce your damage by 15% from the following enemies: Super Mutants, Robots, Scorched, Humans, Mirelurks and Bugs, Ghouls, and Animals, respectively. So these pieces of armor, I've always kind of looked not down on them, but I've always personally hated using very situational armor, because that's what these are. They only benefit you against certain enemies. However, when it comes to Super Mutants, Robots, and Scorched, which I believe includes Scorched Beasts and also kind of Scorched enemies in the game, because these enemies are so rampant in the game, they're very, very common, having Mutant Slayers, Troubleshooters, and Zealots armor is actually really good, because reducing your damage by 15% against these enemies, period, no matter what kind of damage they're dealing, ballistic, energy, whatever it might be, reducing your damage by 15% per piece is a lot. And what I suggest you do is, let's say you're doing a West Tech run, have a bunch of Mutant Slayers armor to protect you from the Super Mutants. You will never die. If you're doing a Nuke run or Encrypted, have a full set of Troubleshooters armor and you will barely take any damage against those robots. Same again, if you're doing Scorched Earth and versing the Scorched Beast Queen, maybe have Zealots armor to protect you against her attacks. Or even have 2 Mutant Slayers, 2 Troubleshooters, and 1 Zealots, and you're protected against most enemies in the game, or at least a lot of common enemies in the game, by a significant amount, 30%, 30%, and 15% in that order if you decide to equip those pieces of armor. I think these can be really good. Again, they are situational, but they're way better than bolstering and vanguards against those particular enemies. The reason why Overeaters is top tier, even though it doesn't apply to energy damage and the like, the fact is that it applies to all enemies. So when you have a full set of Overeaters, you're protected against ballistic damage against literally all enemies in the game, whereas you don't have that with Mutant Slayers, Troubleshooters, Zealots, and the like. And also as well, these pieces of armor might require a lot of micromanaging, constantly swapping in armor for different scenarios. If you don't like that, lean towards something like Overeaters, or even bolstering and vanguards. But to be honest, because of the reason I said before, and how percentage-based reduction in damage is always better than simply increasing your resistance, I would say for the most part, Mutant Slayers, Troubleshooters, and Zealots are actually better than bolstering and vanguards in the game today. When it comes to Assassins, Exterminators, Ghoul Slayers, and Hunters, not as important, but they have their use, especially when it comes to Exterminators against Mirelurk Kings and some Ghouls in the game. But if you're versing Ghouls, Blocker is usually going to help you in most situations anyways. And I think Hunters also technically apply to Scorched Beasts too. I'm not sure if that's been changed, but Zealots definitely do. So yeah, I think these ones are lower tier, but these 3 up here, I think they are a solid mid tier. Some might even argue that they're top tier as well. And then we got Aristocrats, Mutants, and Nocturnal. So Aristocrats gets you up to 20 energy and damage resistance, the higher your caps. Effectively, you need to be above 30,000 caps. Mutants gives you 10 damage and energy resistance if you're mutated and you just need 1 mutation. And then Nocturnal, you get damage and energy resistance of 40, but only at night time between 9 PM and 6 AM. So they each have their drawbacks and their kind of quirks. Aristocrats, you need to have a lot of caps. Not an issue for many of you, but some people might like to spend their caps and they don't always have above 30,000 caps. Mutants is very easily, because it's only 1 mutation, but it's only 10 DR and ER. And Nocturnal, you can only use it at night, even though it's 40 DR and ER. And for the reasons that I said before, especially because these resistances are so much lower than Bolsterings and Vanguard, if you want to have a boost to your resistances in the game, go for Bolstering and Vanguards. If you, for whatever reason, you roll a nice Aristocrats or Mutants or Nocturnal with a really good 2nd and a 3rd star, maybe they have some use, but I think the resistances are a bit too low to justify using them over Bolstering and Vanguards for the most part. And then we have Auto Stim. So you automatically use a Stim pack when you're hit and your health is 25% or less, once every 60 seconds, and you need to have the Stim packs to be able to do that. Now look, I'm a low health build and I barely, I can't imagine myself using Auto Stim or even the perk card that has a very similar effect, because I feel it's better to learn how to manage your health yourself and to use the Stim packs when you need to. Of course, Auto Stim has the benefit of automatically using the Stim pack, so you don't have to think about it and it's really quick. However, it's only once every 60 seconds. And how often in a fight are you hurt a lot and then you need to heal and then you get, you're back down to really low health within 60 seconds? It happens all the time. I think Auto Stim is a lower tier, but some of you might benefit from it. So keep that in mind. And then we got Cloaking. Being hit in melee generates a stealth field once per 30 seconds, and you get granted invisibility for 2 seconds. It only activates if you're hit by a melee attack. Very situational. It's a different use case to Chameleon because the idea is that if you're getting a lot of hits in melee, like by ghouls or whatever, the idea is that you go invisible, it gives you a chance to run away, and then, you're pretty much safe. But still, only with melee, no use against ranged weapons, and only invisibility for 2 seconds. I don't think it's a mid or a top tier effect in the game, and I think there are better effects out there for you. And then we got Regenerating. Slowly regenerate health when you're not in combat, increases heal rate by 5%. When you're not in combat, are you really that desperate to heal? Stim packs are really common. You can drink some purified water, sleep in your bed. And if you want to drink in your bed, you can do that too. But I don't find regenerating to be that important. I think some people like to use regenerating armor when they're stacking together a bunch of stuff to be able to walk in a nuke zone and not need power armor. That is a thing that they do with Watt Rads and Rad Shield and whatnot. I believe regenerating armor might have a role to play there, but I don't actually think it's necessary in that regard. So for those reasons, I do think regenerating is lower tier. So let's move on to the second star. I can hear my dog outside. Can you hear him? He's jingling with his dog tag. Anyways, let's start off with the first tier of the second star. So Fireproof, 25 fire resistance. Really nice. Fire resistance or fire damage is fairly common in the game. Flamers, Molotov cocktails, etc. The floaters as well, which wreck you. So having 25 fire resistance is really nice. It's going to help you. I think it's solid. I think it's top tier. It means you don't need to use asbestos lining. I think that's the mod that helps you with fire damage. It means you don't need fireproof for the most part, unless you're super concerned about explosive damage as well. I would take 25 fire resistance on my armor any day of the week. So for that reason, I do think it's top tier, and that if you roll it with a really good first and a third star, I think you should be using it for sure. And same thing with Hardy. So Hardy, you get 7% less explosion damage, and 5 parts can stack to 35%. And remember, this is a percentage-based reduction in damage. So 7% explosion damage, especially as you start to stack them up, is really nice. Now, mind you, there is a chest mod, I believe it is, called Dense, that effectively nullifies explosive damage anyways in the game. And I use that and I get no explosive damage because I use explosive weapons and I don't want to have any splashback at all. So I personally wouldn't find the need to use Hardy, but you guys use like jetpacks and what's the other one? Asbestos lining and other chest mods all the time. Mostly jetpacks. Everyone likes to use a jetpack. So if you don't want to use Dense and you don't want to waste 3 points on Fireproof to improve your fire and explosive damage, Hardy is a really nice choice. So I think it's actually either the second or the third best in this first tier of the second star. So I think it's a really great choice and you should be using it if you don't want to use that chest mod. Or again, Fireproof. Then Poisoners, plus 25 poison resistance. I should also say with Fireproof, there's a legendary perk card that does the exact same thing. But if you don't want to rank that up with perk coins, then you don't necessarily need that perk card. You can just use Fireproof and the actual perk card. So then we got Poisoners, plus 25 poison resistance. Again, there's a legendary perk card that does the exact same thing, but you have to rank that up for it to be really good. And to be honest, you just need plus 25 poison resistance, or even plus 50. That's all you really need when it comes to poison damage in the game. Even if you're a low health build, I know that poison damage can wreck you, but as soon as you have 25 poison resistance, you're very well protected until you can heal yourself anyways. So even one piece of Poisoners is really nice. Again, you don't need it if you have that legendary perk card, but I find that there are probably better legendary perk cards like the special ones or taking one from the team or follow through that you can be using and not need to have to, use up a legendary perk card slot. So 1 Poisoner's armor is all you need in the game. 2 if you want to be really protected. Then we got Powered. I think this is the best second star. It increases your AP refresh speed by 5 per part, and that's really nice. I have 3 powered armor pieces in the game, and when I use up all my AP, it literally refills like this. It's so fast, it's ridiculous. It means you don't really need to use Action Boy or Action Girl, and in fact, if you have 2 or 3 of these pieces, there are diminishing returns if you try to stack that together with Action Boy and Action Girl. So I feel like this is really nice. It means you can use VATS more, you can sprint more, you can use Dodgy more, the perk card that reduces your damage, using AP in the process. So for sure, Powered, I believe, is the best second star. And if I already had some fire resistance and poison resistance or even Hardy, the rest of my armor pieces, I'm going to try and aim towards Powered, that's for sure. And then we'll move on to the second tier of the second star, Hazmat, plus 25 radiation resistance. This is not really helping you in a nuke zone. This is really kind of helping you when you're versing an enemy like a ghoul and they're dealing radiation damage when they hit you with their melee attacks. So that's where it can become a little bit more useful, but it's definitely not as important as fire resistance or poison resistance. So I would take it in a pinch, but definitely not a second star that I'm aiming towards. And I think the same goes as well for warming and cryo resistance, because how often are you getting cryo damage in the game? You know, the floaters, cryolators, but that's really about it for the most part, at least common enemies anyway. So again, radiation and cryo resistance, you take them, they're nice to have, but not super important in my opinion, especially not if you're a full health build as well. And then Glutton, so hunger and thirst grows 10% slower, stacks to a maximum of 50%. The only reason why I have this in the second tier is because of Overeaters, because Overeaters is top tier, and the idea is you're trying to stay above 81% full for your hydration and your fed meters as much as you can. So Gluttons is just helping you stay there for longer without the need to constantly eat and drink. Is it absolutely necessary? No, of course not. So maybe it does belong in the third tier if that's you. But I like the idea of stacking together a couple of Glutton to keep me above 81% fed and hydrated for longer without needing to constantly eat and drink, especially if you are in the middle of a firefight and you happen to drop below. But good planning avoids that anyway. So it could be a third tier one, but I think it's a nice combination with Overeaters. And then we have all the special boosting armor pieces. So strength, agility, charisma, endurance, intelligence, luck, and perception. I mentioned before all the benefits that boosting these special have. I didn't mention endurance, but because that's not relevant for unyielding, but when you boost your endurance, you get a better HP. That's the main thing anyways. But it's only by 1 for all of these. So that's such a minuscule boost to this special. So all those benefits that I mentioned before, you're not really noticing much of a difference. The one exception that I have in the second tier is strength, because 1, it gives you more carry capacity and everyone wants to have that. But also 2, it boosts the damage if you're a melee / unarmed build. So if you want to have as high DPS as possible, technically you should be aiming for a second star being strength in the game. But that's just one build in the game. So if you're not that, it's really just helping your carry weight. But even just for that reason, I think it is a solid second star or second tier. But for the rest of them, such a small boost to your AP, small boost to your bartering. I think it's like 5 HP for your endurance, about that. Such a small boost to your experience points, to your luck and perception. I can't justify having most of these being in the second tier, but if it's your build and if it's your particular use case, then you might find a need to have one of these boosting your special in a way. For instance, for me, I'm trying to aim for 33 luck in the game, because that means every second shot in VATS is actually critical for me. It's really great. And having +1 luck armor just helps me get to 33. Really nice. So that's why for me, I would put luck into second tier, but for most people, I don't think it is. So that's what I would say about the special boosting ones. And finally, antiseptic, plus 25% environmental disease resistance. These can stack, but remember that environmental disease is not the same as disease obtained from creatures attacking you. It's a completely different source of disease. Effectively, if you're sleeping on the ground, if you're exposed to toxic air, if you're in water and you get a disease, that is environmental disease resistance. So how often does it happen to you? To be honest, for me, not that often. And if you get a disease, they're usually not that bad. And you can just use a disease cure or go back and use your symptomatic at your camp. So I don't think antiseptic is super important in the game. That's for sure. And then finally, there's a lot of talking in this video. Let's move on to the third star. So we've got Cavaliers and Sentinels. We talk about these together. So Cavaliers, 75% chance to reduce damage by 15% while sprinting. And Sentinels, 75% chance to reduce damage by 15% when you're standing still. So these effects stack additively, 5 parts to reduce your damage by 60%, and the 75% chance will calculate one time regardless of the number of equipped parts that you have. And when it comes to Sentinels, you must be stationary and not crouch, and the effect is actually broken during a stagger, though jumping and jetpacking does not break the effect. So why are these so good? These are effectively, in my opinion, the best third star legendary effects in the game. If you're a melee build and running around a lot, you go with Cavaliers. If you're a ranged user, you go with Sentinels. So these are so good because literally every time someone hits you in these particular scenarios, you have a 75% chance to reduce your damage by 15%. That is a massive chance, and that is a massive reduction in damage, especially as you start to stack these together to get that full 60%. A god roll in Fallout 76 when it comes to armor is effectively considered getting Cavaliers or Sentinels, again depending upon your role. So for sure, if you're trying to be protected in the game, and if you're trying to get one of the best 3rd stars, or the best 3rd stars, I would say, have Cavaliers or have Sentinels depending on your use case. Even if you are a stealth build, I would say Cavaliers is better for you, because when you're stealthy, you're usually crouched, and if you ever break sneak because, you know, an enemy finds you or whatever, and you're trying to run away to not die, that's where Cavaliers can help you as a stealth build, because again, it's reducing your damage when you're sprinting. So really good effects. I think everyone should be aiming towards those in the game. Then we have improved sneaking. So you become harder to detect while sneaking, reduces movement sound by 24%, increases sneak by 25%, and it does not stack. So you can only have one because it does not stack. However, because again, sneak builds are so good and powerful in the game, they really are top tier. Improved sneaking has to be tier 1 when it comes to these 3rd stars, but again, you only need one, so keep that in mind. And then we have all the weight reducing legendary effects. So reduced ammo weight, weapon weight, ammo weight, food, drink, chem weight, and junk weight, all by 20%. And the way these work is that no matter how much you stack these together with the armor pieces or even the perk cards that achieve a similar effect, you can never exceed a weight reduction of 90%. So it's always going to stack up to 90%, though that is still very good, of course. And hell, even a 20% reduction when it comes to any of these is really good. The one that I would say is a solid top tier is reduced weapon weight, because usually that weighs more, especially if you're a heavy guns user, but of course it depends on your build. For people that like to carry around a lot of ammo, reduced ammo weight might be top tier for you. If you have a lot of food and drinking chems, reduced food drink chem weight might be top tier for you. Junk, I would say, is probably a solid 2nd tier, and I would never move it up, because when it comes to junk, you can just go back to your camp and scrap and then kind of go back out into the wasteland. It's not as debilitating as weapons you need to carry all the time, or ammo you need to carry all the time, or food drinking chems you need to carry all the time. So I reckon there's a good argument for building up ammo and food drinking chem even into the 1st tier if that's you, but if it was my decision, I would say weapon weights is the best, because they usually weigh the most in the game, especially if you like to use a lot of weapons. And then we've got acrobats. So reduces falling damage by 50%. They stack additively. So 2 or more parts reduces your fall damage by 100%. I was tempted to put this into the 1st tier, to be honest, because I really like acrobats. Everyone's using jetpacks. Everyone's using marsupial. So fall damage happens every now and again. And especially if you're a low health build, you want to be careful with that, because it can actually kill you. So for sure, even just having 2 acrobat pieces, I would take any day of the week to have no fall damage. It means you don't need to use goat legs, and it's even better than goat legs, the perk card. So for sure, acrobats is really solid. Even 1's going to do you nicely, but 2, if you can get it, you're going to have no fall damage, so it's really nice. And then we have all the new elemental legendary effects. So we have burning, electrified, frozen, and toxic. So these each give you a 5% chance to deal 100 elemental damage to melee attackers, and when it does proc, it's 25 damage over 4 seconds. So, and again, you can see the requisite or the relevant elemental damage: fire, energy, frost, and poison. So the reason why these are in 2nd tier is because I think they're a nice choice. Would I be aiming towards these? No. But being able to deal more damage against enemies, I would obviously take. It, of course, is a very low chance. It's a 5% chance, but it's literally 5% every time they hit you. So it will proc every now and again. Is it doing the craziest damage in the world, 25 over 4 seconds? Obviously not. It's not going to help you a lot against kind of super tanky enemies and higher leveled enemies. But again, if you had a great 1st and a 2nd star, you would take any one of these 4, and be happy with them. I certainly would. They're just not ones that I'm personally aiming towards to be able to maximize my DPS, because technically it is helping your DPS, but it's kind of really minor in my opinion. And then we have durability. They break 50% slower, and condition loss is divided by 2 per part. So with just how expensive, repairing your armor can be, and you have 5 pieces that can, break fairly frequently, I really like durability as a 2nd tier of the 3rd star, because I know a lot of people out there, you don't have a lot of repair kits. You either, not buying them from the atomic shop, or you're not doing a lot of Scorch Beast runs to get the improved repair kits. So just having some armor with some slower condition loss, I think is really nice. You're saving more materials, and also it's less likely for your armor to break mid-fight, which happens to me too often because I never check up on it. So I like durability, and I think for that reason, especially for kind of like, lower players or lower level players in the game or newer players in the game, durability I think is going to be a really nice one for you, especially as you start to build your junk stores in the game. And then we got the last tier. So Cavaliers, the other Cavaliers, reduces your damage by 15% while blocking, stacks additively, 5 parts reduces incoming damage by 60%. Now, some of you might think this is really good, especially if you're a melee build and you're blocking a lot. But in my opinion, even if you are a melee build and you're blocking, like, you should be swinging your weapon more instead of blocking all the time. I know that there are some situations where you're getting dealt a lot of damage, so blocking can help save your life effectively, but in my opinion, it's always better to try and kill the enemy first by just swinging your melee weapon as much as you can. So I couldn't justify putting Cavaliers into second tier. Some of you might, but in my opinion, it's a third tier and third star. Then we have Dissipating, slowly regen radiation damage when you're not in combat, increases radiation regen by 0.25. Obviously, if you're a low health build, you don't need this. If you're a high health build, it might help you. And again, I think they're relevant in the circumstances where people are walking through a nuke zone without a power armor. I don't think Dissipating is actually necessary over Watt Rads and Rad Shields and whatnot, but it might help you a little bit in that regard. Then Divers grants the ability to breathe on the water. How often are you doing that? I think it is a third tier here. Doctors, Stimpaks, Radaway, and Rad-X are 5% more effective. They can stack up to 25%, but it's a very, very small improvement to Stimpaks, Radaway, and Rad-X, and they're fairly common med items in the game, so just a 5% improvement, I don't think that's strong enough to make it even a second tier and the third star. Reduce limb damage, receive 15% less limb damage, it applies to all limbs, stacks multiplicatively. If you're concerned about limb damage, just have Adamantium Skeleton and eliminate your limb damage completely. Like, limb damage is not too dangerous in the game, it's not your actual health, it's your limb health. And even if you do have limb damage, you just use a Stimpak anyway. So I think it is a third tier here. And then Safe Crackers increases the sweet spot while picking locks, increases sweet spot by 100% per part. How often are you picking locks in the game? So yeah, that's about it. I think I covered that fairly well, and this video won't be too long. So let's get to the conclusion. Alrighty, Wastelanders, that's all from me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And until next time, this has been the Lone Vault Wanderer. Please take care of yourselves, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.